Hey, what's up you guys? Bloody Jacob here to bring you another movie review. This time we're going to be talking about 2013's Evil Dead, which yes, I do already own on Blu-ray. I reviewed the original Evil Dead film from 1981 a while ago, not too long ago actually, so you can go look that up in my channel if you want to see my thoughts on that. And this of course came out in 2013. And some of the same people were involved in this one. People call it a remake, but technically it's not. Technically it is. Another term I've seen for it is, like a soft reboot, it's called. Like following the same lines as the first one, but then still maintaining some form of continuity. But, it's kind of confusing on that end. But it's produced by Bruce Campbell. And also by Sam Raimi, of course, did the first films and such. And it's directed by and co-written by Fede Alvarez, who also recently worked on Don't Breathe, another film I like quite a bit. And overall, I really liked, if not loved, this movie. I thought the original one was, okay for what it was. That one is a lot more sort of comedy, black humor oriented, and this one it's quite a bit more self-serious, although there still are things that are so over the top you sort of get a kick out of more than anything, unless you're my girlfriend who just gets really grossed out by it. It's definitely one of the most violent horror movies I've seen, as far as blood and gore goes, but it's not really a complaint. Some of us seek that out. But there is some actual substance to this as well, and although like I said, this one and the original 81 version are very different sort of animals, I actually prefer this movie by far, and that's probably going to piss some people off. I don't know, but the only thing that the original film has that this one doesn't is Bruce Campbell, being the star. And of course, Bruce Campbell's good for, Ash, the one-liners and stuff like that. But Jane Levy is our main star here, and I really, really like her as an actress. She played Mandy during the first season of Shameless. She was in Don't Breathe, and I really like her work. I think she's a very good actress, and I think she's a better character, honestly, at least in the first film. I'm not speaking as to what Ash becomes, the second and later on and such, very different characters, like I said, but as far as this first movie goes, I think it has a lot that makes it superior, I had heard they had, wanted to redo an Evil Dead movie for a little while because they believed they could do better, of course, with today's special effects and capabilities, and that rang true here because... Well, another thing we should probably discuss is the budget difference. Of course, with the original Evil Dead, that had about like $400,000 budget, I think, and some of that was actually made up of loans and Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell getting help from friends and such like that. But this one, it had a budget of $17 million. So there's definitely a difference in the quality of that and stuff like that, and what they're all able to do. So, my point is, though, not only was it superior with the violent side of things, like, the makeup looks great, the blood looks real, but the characters themselves in the movie are actually, quite a bit better. They're actually somewhat fleshed out, whereas in the first Evil Dead movie, everyone besides Bruce Campbell sort of felt like, just there to die, just there to, get possessed and, get brutally, killed somehow. But with this one, we actually get a story for our characters, and we actually get a reason for them being at this cabin, and we get a reason for them actually staying there. Even when they actually try to leave, there's like a very clear reason why they can't get out yet, whereas in the first one, it seemed like it still could be possible for them to get away if they had really wanted to. So just the writing in general is quite a bit better in the soft reboot here. In the 2013 Evil Dead, and this movie, I'm just gonna say it's one of the best horror movies I've seen in a long time. I don't know why I held off on watching it for so long, and I will be doing video reviews on the original Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness in the future. But for now, this is by far my favorite movie in the franchise, and it's honestly one of my favorite horror movies in a while. I could see this being one of my favorites of all time, really. I just really, really enjoyed it. The premise of it is pretty simple. The friends go to this cabin, and then, of course, someone reads this Book of the Dead or opens it, and, of course, unleashes this, evil, demonic type of entity that begins possessing them and, sort of turning them against each other and such. So it's pretty much the same thing in this movie as it was in the first one, minus that added characters' backstory. They actually make them feel like characters, not just bodies. And Jane Levy's character, Mia, she is a recovering drug addict. I don't know if there's alcoholism involved with it too or what, but her friends have taken her there to sort of, help her get sober again, or to help her, just sort of shake her addictions, really. And we find out that they've tried that before, but she always ends up relapsing in a pretty major way. But so I think that is actually a legitimate and personal reason for them to be out there. And, in the opening, we see this pretty intense sequence of, this girl being captured in the woods. And at first it seems like, oh yeah, they got this little girl in the woods, but then it turns out she's the one possessed, and it's this father who has to recite this and light her on fire to put her down, and to make her spirit at peace. So I thought that was all pretty good too. So the premise of it, it's kind of sticking to what the original did, but it actually makes it make a hell of a lot more sense, like I said. And I think they execute it pretty well. The actors in the movie are fine, they're not really, standouts, but I think they do a much better job. They feel quite a bit less wooden than the actors in the original film. And Jane Levy does a really good job, actually, and if there is a highlight acting-wise, it's definitely her. She gets to portray quite a bit in this movie, from her actually being, possessed, and being that, one looking, from under, from the cellar, the basement and such, that we get that iconic shot. But then she also gets to, portray Mia's own personal struggles and what she becomes by the end of the movie. And, another little subplot to it is that her and her brother David, played by Shiloh Fernandez, we get a little bit of backstory on the relationship with their mother, how she was there for her as she was, dying. She had to see her wither away, whereas David was never around, and so you get a little bit of story with that. So again, fleshed out the characters and made us care at least a little bit about them, I think. And with this, I had read a little bit about the movie before I actually watched it, and I was reading about how they, at one point anyway, had crossover plans for Mia and Ash, and so I was expecting Mia to sort of be like the female version of Ash in this movie. But when she actually gets possessed and, given the treatment in the basement and such, I was kind of questioning it. But they really twist it, and they throw it for a loop by the end of the movie, because at first, if you didn't know otherwise, it seems like David's being built up as like this next Ash character to go alongside Bruce Campbell. But Mia actually manages to come back, after David buries her alive. And, he brings her back up and tries to revive her anyway. And it actually works, and she's actually back in her right mind as far as we know. And we just get this badass sequence against, or with Mia and the Abomination. But we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. And everyone else, meanwhile, there's tons of brutal violence throughout the movie, things ranging from a nail gun to a crowbar. And things like that. Like I said, the effects for it are all very, very good. There's very little CGI used in this movie. That was one of their main points to, when they started production on the movie. And of course, practical effects are quite a bit more expensive and, of course, time-consuming. Whereas a lot of horror movies nowadays, they go with CGI because it's cheaper and quite a bit quicker. So I admire that they actually use practical effects in this one. I think they use like I don't know, like 700 gallons of fake blood or something like that. So that's kind of impressive. And the majority of it was in the final sequence, I guess, or like the later part of the movie, but still. Like the makeup for Mia when she's possessed looks really, really good, really realistic. As well as when things are happening to her friends, Olivia and Natalie. So that all looks really, really well done. And is it scary? Kinda. It's not, like, I don't think it's like the scariest movie I've ever seen. But once it hits a certain point, when Mia gets infected or possessed, it's like this non-stop ride of intensity, really. Crazy shit hits the fan, one thing after another. And so it really has this good pace to it. I think it rarely slows down when it gets going. So I really admire that about it. The violence will probably be a bit much for some people. But me, violence and gore isn't all I look for in horror movies. A lot of times I admire horror movies that rely more on the suspense of it. But at the same time, I do enjoy my buckets of blood. And I get plenty of that here. And like I said, it does have a pretty intense feeling throughout the movie. So it does have sort of that rush of urgency and desperation behind it that I do like. And something I did like about the first Evil Dead is that you had that feeling of a sort of isolation at the cabin. And I feel like that wasn't as apparent in this movie. But I think our survivors or our victims, here went through quite a bit more shit. It's far more brutal looking. And again, that's that's another thing that could be connected to their budget and such. But yeah. So overall, I absolutely love this movie and how it ends. Like I said, when Mia is actually brought back, to her normal self, David is unfortunately killed, but he manages to sacrifice himself and light the cabin on fire, to destroy one of the demons who have taken over Eric, who is the one actually aware of this, but he's also the one who opened the book in the first place. Great job, man. But this is when Mia actually takes up that sort of like Ash Williams, persona, really. And I was pretty happy about that. So I like how they sort of flipped it and had to be the female in the situation, whereas earlier in the movie, David and Mia's fates are sort of paralleling Ash and his sister in the original film, but they sort of flipped it and had Mia be the one to come out on top by the end of it. And Mia, she really went through the ringer in this movie, from being the victim of that tree rape scene on the cover of the movie, but she gets possessed, she gets to play that out. Jane Levy again doing a really good job, and then she comes back and becomes this female Ash, and it was awesome. You see the abomination, it rises, it's very creepy looking, it looks kind of reminds you of The Ring a little bit as far as the design goes for it, but it was pretty creepy looking. And at one point, this she gets this chainsaw. Finally, someone grabbed the damn chainsaw. David had been trying to use the shotgun throughout the movie, the boomstick and such, but that didn't really work, too much. But finally, Mia grabs the chainsaw when others had looked at it before, and she's trying to rev it up. It's not working. She gets in a car. Abomination tips it over, lands on her hand, and she has to tear her hand off, in order to get free. And she sort of like attaches the chainsaw to her hand and uses the chainsaw. She finally gets it working, and she slices the abomination's legs and just splits its head down the middle with the chainsaw. It was awesome and bloody as fuck. I absolutely loved it, man. I was just clapping and sort of cheering when Mia, just chainsawed her head. That was pretty amazing. I gotta say, that's one of my favorite scenes in a horror movie I've seen in a while. And then Mia actually manages to survive and walks off. We need a sequel to this movie, holy shit. I mean, it did pretty well critically as far as horror movies usually do. It made a good amount of the box office. Like I said, it had a $17 million budget, and it made about $97.5 million. I don't know why they haven't capitalized and made another movie of it yet. I had read that's because of Ash vs. Evil Dead, and the writer's not really not really being ready to like cross them over somehow, and it would cause too much trouble in their story they're trying to tell on the show. But really, come on, just make another movie. I'd like to see Ash and Mia team up. I think it would be awesome. But at the same time, I like the self-seriousness of this one. I feel like Ash would take away from that a little bit. But I still feel like they can make it work. Either have them do the crossover, they could fit it into the show. Come on, it can't be that hard, right? And or just have Mia be one of the other main characters on Ash vs. Evil Dead or something. I don't know. I feel like they could sort of mesh well if enough time is spent with them. But either way, I need to see a continuation to Mia's story because she is just awesome by the end of it. And Jane Levy did such a great job. She had a lot to sink her teeth into this one. I like when the blood rain comes down at the end. It's a very cool visual. Again, all the practical effects. It's just wonderful to see in a horror movie nowadays. But yeah, overall, Evil Dead, I love this one. One of my favorite movies. I've seen in a long time. I know I've said that with Lights Out, and I've seen that with Don't Breathe, although Don't Breathe is more of like a thriller film with horror elements. I like Lights Out as a horror movie for a different reason. Again, with a more suspense-based, horror that they used in that, whereas this one is more straight-up blood and intense shit all the way through. But this might actually, Evil Dead 2013 might actually be one of my favorite horror films of all time. I'm very happy to have watched it. I'm sorry it took me so long. But I'm very happy to own it on Blu-ray. And I pray, I'm not the religious type, but, I'd like to get a continuation sometime. But yeah, I'm going to give this movie actually an A or A-. I think that's how much I liked it. But yeah, so let me know what you guys thought about this movie and the Evil Dead series as a whole. What one's your favorite? How is this one compared to the original? Which one do you prefer? You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, like, subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.